Episode 13. Is it 12? 13. See, now again, I lost where I'm at. Gee. Anyways, so tonight, I've been wondering and I've been thinking myself recently. I was watching a show called Swap Shop. What it is that there's this radio station that goes and says, "Hello, listeners. This is the Swap Shop." And people call in and they're like, "Hey, Mr. Swap Shop, my name is Bill, and I've got a farm that's got a bunch of stuff we're just trying to sell." And people go like, "Cool." And then people go out to this farm and they're like, "The farm is on 335 Baker Road in Tennessee." And this is like in the south and Midwest area. And people go driving out there and they go, and then what it is like pickers, American pickers, and like it's this whole thing about like finding cool stuff, and and you find like, oh wow, this is so cool, and then you get to, and then we're gonna go sell this thing, and then we're gonna make money, and we never see them actually sell the thing, but they say we're gonna sell this thing and it's gonna be worth, and then they tally it up at the end and like, well, we spent $300 and we're gonna end up making about $800 at the end of this. It's like the pawn shop, or it's like pawn shop, or the storage wars, or this whole notion of like, here's some cool stuff, we're gonna like, and then you're gonna go like try to sell this cool stuff, and here's some like cool stuff to find, and we're gonna do some history on this cool stuff. It's very like econ business thing hidden as like but it's really a history thing hidden as like an econ business like picker things. So American Pickers, and these are really fun shows, and we don't have games like that. Because how do you make a game like that? And I don't know if I honestly don't know, and I don't know how to concept it other than making a massive roll table. Like how do you make a game to that degree of like, here is a bundle of stuff across the universes of time and space and whatever it is. How do you create something really unique? And that's hard, because like, what are you gonna do? Like I imagine what you could do it in you can do it in two major ways, and one of them is we create a D1000 table. Like legit 1,000 items, and you roll roughly 3d10. Yeah, you roll 3d10, and you decide which one's going to be the 100, which one's going to be the 10, and which one's going to be the 0 marker, the first 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever's. The 10s, the 1s, or the 100s. And because you couldn't do this game if you're going to do it small. Like, oh yeah, we're just going to do like 100 items. Like, you can't, no. 100 items, no. Because the imagine is that you're supposed to be able to create if I was running this, like if it was me making this game, it's 1,000 items. We're going 999 items, and we're going full tilt, and it could be anything. And that's what I would love. Like, that's what I think you should make, is if you're going to make a game like this, you have to have it be full tilt. You have to make it go all the way to the nth degree, and boom. The other option is you do a multitude of smaller roll tables, and then you roll like D100s off of each individual roll table. But again, it has to be big. So maybe you do like 10 D100 roll tables, and if you want to, you just mix and match 3 tables of your choosing, like eras, time pieces, antiques, furniture. You can, I mean, just imagine 100 tossable items of furniture, sports memorabilia, Hollywood memorabilia. I think even just automotive would be pretty cool. But what you want is just this massive, hulking game to feel like there's so much possibility that you could find treasures in the biggest places. And I think that's the fun part of the game, is that, you know, you've got to be able to find and separate trash from real, and each one should have like a value. And then what you would be fun is that we put a legitimate value behind all 1,000 items. Like, even more fun, we could have like an auction price, we can have like a store price, and we could just have it like what is like its base value. Like, it could be that there's like multitudes of prices, and we could really make this into a very market focused game of haggling, buying, manipulating, trying to find the cool stuff, trying to get the cool stuff, trying to get the best stuff. And then, you know, we could even have rivals trying to fight you for the material. There's got to be like, you got to do it, you can't do it, like, you got to do stats, and there's got to be you know what, let's imagine it like if it were using, like, from last week, Jordan Jordan did an SRD, and what it could be is that I would do his SRD. Look, okay, so you have 3 stats, and what it is that you have to roll above a certain stat. You have to roll below a certain stat to succeed, and once you roll below that, if you roll above that stat, then the stat decreases. And that could be a thing in terms of like the 3 stats could be, instead of the stats that he has in the SRD, we change the stats to be identify, appraise, and search. And the fun part could be that whenever you find something, we create this sort of like joint storytelling where we create the history of an item. Like, oh, this is a 1950s record of J. Belasco Baloo. I don't know, that's a terrible name. Okay, but J. Belasco Baloo was this famous musician in the 1950s, and everybody gets to make this story about what's the item story. Like, yeah, he only made about 300 records, and all of the records were mostly destroyed in a fire. And I think that's the fun part. We get to tell these really cool stories of like these wonderfully weird items, and then we have to try to make a value for them. Or, you know what, maybe there isn't a value for them. What the GM does is just hides a dollar value, and what you have to do is you have to like roll your negotiate skill. So there's an appraise skill, there's an identify skill, there's a search skill, and there's like a negotiate value. And I think rather than having it be a depreciating stat, it could be that it does depreciate, but like it just depreciates per game, so that the more you're trying to pick, the more you're trying to search for stuff, the more incremental you're not able to do it. So we do identify, we do appraise, and then we do haggle, which is really fun. So you have really only 3 stats. So you'd have search, appraise / identify, and haggle. So if you succeed on the search thing, you can find items, and like depending on how well. And then, you know what? I think if I was to do the SRD, I'd be like, if you are X amount below the number, or if you roll a 1, then you get to do a double roll, or if you roll it, you know, something like that. Because I think it is interesting that you get a diminishing capacity as you do more searching. Like, you can't just haggle, and you have to be very like astute on how you decide what you're going to search through. And if we're going to do like a D1000, it could be that only certain items can be found in certain places. So like maybe it's really like multifaceted, and now I'm just building this game with. Now there's gonna be like it's if it's a D1000, maybe there's or if we did a D100 thing, maybe some of those items can only be found in like barns, or you yeah. So you succeed, then you roll. Or maybe you succeed and there's a percentage roll for the appraisal check or something like that. That could be a fun thing. But the more you search and the more you go through things, the harder it is for you as a gamer. I think that's if I was to use his SRD. And I think Jordan was here it was with our show last week. And I think that's if I wanted to do his as an SRD, that's maybe how I would do it. I think that the diminishing capacity makes it interesting. I think that I don't know if it'll work for this notion, but I do like it. I do like the notion of his SRD for a Indiana Jones adventure game. I was thinking about this just right now. Like, it just came through my mind that, like, if I was to do Jordan's Zone Fighters SRD game, which is his 3 stats and the diminishing capacity of the stats, I think that it would be really cool to do it as a Indiana Jones sort of like Tomb Raider adventure type of situation, because the longer you go deeper into the tunnel, the harder it is, and the more like intrepid it is, which actually builds up a high amount of tension in the game. Like, could you imagine then, like, da 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 da, you're jumping and you're swinging and you're jumping and you're swinging, you're hitting things with whips, and then as you continue to do this, you get less good at it. Isn't that just fun? And it could be I like the idea of that you can take his game and just substitute a bunch of random stats into it. But back to this thing, I just imagine that I just like the idea that there's these maybe there's really is going to be 10 D100 tables, and depending on where you're searching really depends on like it could also like be affected by time as well. Like, if you come to a place at the end of the day, you have less of a chance to getting something. The problem is there's just so many factorials that make the game very complex. Like finding and searching games are just really hard to make into a reality. And as much as I would love a game where I could be like an American picker or whatever it is, driving around the backfields of Tennessee and stopping in at barns and being like, hey, these are Hot Wheels. How much you want for them? I'll take about $3 snort, and then more like a old guy or whatever. Yeah, I'll take about $3 for the Hot Wheels each one. So there's about 15 in there, so how's about $45? And then it's like, well, what about 40? Okay, I'll take 40, that sounds good. And you're like, okay, thank you, old timer. And you look at the camera and you're like, I bought this Hot Wheels for $40, but I can sell them at my shop for about $6.95. That's a $4 profit, so I've just made pushing, and then there's a little line that says like, oh, we made this much money. And I think that's like super cool as a TV show, because you're like, wow. But like, because economics and business can be so convoluted, it can be hard to make this game into a reality. But I do like the notion of like an American Picker Storage Wars type of game. But I think in order to do it, you really do need like a item generator. And I think an item generator is even just the bare minimum. I think what you really want is to make like, you really want depth, and you really want something like I imagine that if this is something you really, really want to do, like you genuinely want to do, you're gonna program like a item generator off of an app, and it could just be that and then you base a lot of like, and you can put like in it things like factorials that need to be rolled, and you really you create this sort of in-depth, like if A is happening, B is happening, and C is happening, then this is what's happening. So you would have a screen as a GM, and you type in like, oh, it's It's a small barn. Okay, so a small barn means the only X amount of items are available. It's a it's rural. It's not city. It's poor, or it's lower income. Okay, cool. It's more of a, and the person is more of a hoarder than a collector. Okay, so this changes the dynamic of the game. Like, I think that's if you were able to put something in there, and then that could just sort of frame down this list, this mega list of games, this mega list of items. Then I think then when you roll, you really are rolling for maybe 80 items, and and if you find within those 80 items the best thing, it's great. But there's always a possibility that when you roll, you don't get like something good. So, like, I imagine you need to have a large depth of items, because you need to be able to say that there's something not good. And then because there's something not good, that's what the game centers on. Because, like, you find the sign, and then the thing about it is, which would be more interesting and even more on top of that, is that there should be like a status level to each of the items. Like, you could get a prop from a Star Wars film, but it could be in mint condition, or it could be completely destroyed. And I think you need to be able to find this destroyed items just as much as you can find the mint condition items, because then it makes the game about really grinding to try to find cool stuff. Like, if this is the game, you want to make the feel be, we are going out, we are searching, we are grinding, we are digging through things, we are being physical, we are being muddy, we are being dirty, and we find a lot more crap than what is treasure. But if you've got to dig through all that crap to get to the treasure, it makes the game a lot more fun. Am I right? Like, I think you're sitting there going like, man, this must be like, this is what the feel of the game has to be. You have to make a game be big and bold. The reason that we haven't done it is because that requires a lot of writing. And you have to make it so that you do like an SQL thing, or you have to do like a Python, like a very programmed situation where, like, depending on the time of day, depending on the advertising, you create these like peripheries where, like, it opens up X amount of items on a list, and of maybe a 1,000 or multitude list, you really only can find up to 60 items in a thing, and you have to keep rolling, and you have to keep trying, and there could be a point where, like, the app diminishes your capability the more you do it. The more you search, the more you grind, the less you find. So you really are going to need to, so that's the reason, like, maybe the SRD that Jordan made doesn't necessarily work with this if you do it the way I'm talking about, using an application. Because what you want isn't like a diminishing capability necessarily. What you really want is for there to be more of a diminishing dice capacity. Like, if your dice don't do well, like, you need to have failures have impact on the dice point. Like, if I roll a 3 instead of a 7, and 7s are good, so imagine the 7 is a good number, or the closer you are, like, so if we did the SRDs, let's say Jordan does, so maybe the closer you are to 11, the better it is. So you could, because you get closer to that failure line. So you're like, if you roll a 10 and you have a threshold of 11, then that means you have a higher propensity to be able to land the big item. And I like that notion, is that, like, you have diminishing capacity. Your how you roll creates a diminishing capacity that has nothing that affects the dice pool, the dice roll, that could affect you in the app. The closer you are to failure, the better you do in the game. But the more you toe that line, the more difficult it is for you. So yeah, maybe the SRD works because then you're shrinking every time you go out searching. Oh, now it's like your threshold is 9, your max threshold. So if you roll above a 9, so that's your number. So, but maybe you're getting closer and closer to flirting to failures, constantly closing to failures. And I can't imagine that, like, I imagine that, like, the game would do really well that you get to reset your character back to the top. But and so that would be the thing, is that maybe if we did it this way, then we would do 1, 2, 3. Like, the stats would have different capacities, or you'd have a number and you get to distribute it according to the thing. So, like, there's possibility of 33 numbers. So maybe we'd only want to do like 25 or 20. So 20. Say, let's just start mathematically saying 20 stat points can be distributed. Maybe 25. So then you could do 11 for 1, which is the max you can do. And that leaves you somewhere around like 14 points. So you could do 11, 7, 7. Or you could do 10, you can do 9, 8, 8. Which is a good place to be. 988 is really good, but you still have those 3 numbers that can possibly fail on the top side of it, or 4 numbers on the top side of it. So 25, I think, is a really good number to start with. Or 25, I would do 25 points distributed across the 3 stats. I think you do identify / appraise, you do search, and then you do haggle. And then that makes the game more interesting because everybody has a purpose in the game. And the GM could find the value, like the value might not, so the value could also change according to, that's why you want this app thing. Like, maybe if we do this app thing, the value also changes according to the person. So like, if it's a barn, maybe the person's like undervaluing this item. He's like, oh, this person's only like $20, but maybe it's sentimental, and maybe the person is going to put personalities in there. So the person, whatever the GM is, can be like, oh, put all these things, like, oh, the person is sentimental, the person lives in a rural town, all these things are things that they've been they're a hoarder and they collect these things, so they're all emotional and attached to it. Okay, so now it's like your character is playing like, that thing is going to be $1,000, and like, if the value is $600, then the players are thinking, oh, it's 1,000, that must be worth a lot, but like, maybe your appraise score tells you that thing's maybe going to be worth about $300, and that's what this appraise thing could do, is that the appraise or identify could do, is that it can give you an idea of what the value is. And again, the closer you are to failure, the better it is. So I really do imagine that like an app could do well for this type of thing, because you really want the app to do a lot of the heavy lifting. But yeah, if it was up to me and creating this game to be a magnitude of items, and you type in, you just very GM friendly, where you just type in, okay, the player who rolled it is a 9 and they rolled an 8. Oh, okay, so that gets you closer to the true value. And the closer you are to being at the bottom, the better you are. Like, oh, you're a 4 and you roll a 3, but like, you're constantly on the threat of failure. Like, so there's a trade-off. Like, it's a really good trade-off, because every time you roll at 4, you're like closer to failure. But if you succeed, your success goes so much further, and that makes the game far more interesting, right? Like, yes, it's easy to succeed at 11, but when you're rolling, but you could roll a 3, which means you're further away from the possibility. So that's where the math can come in. And so like, try to imagine like so player A has an 11 and rolls a 3. Well, that does, so they're searching for something, and they say, oh, well, then you really don't find anything good. But say that the first player rolls a 10 and their threshold is 11. So they're very close to failure, or they hit an 11, which is even better. You get the best thing. You get a higher possibility. So then you get maybe a bonus according to the app, and it gives you a boost. And so maybe the person finds a jukebox, and it's a really cool jukebox, and because of the level, it also increases the value possibility of it, and it's near mint condition. Like, mint condition's the top, near mint condition's the second thing underneath it, and it's great. Like, it's near mint condition. Now this thing is very valuable. You can tell it's probably very valuable. So one of the other players rolls an appraise roll, and they roll maybe a 2, and their threshold's an 8. So I'm like, oh man, that's gonna give you a value, but maybe not the best value. But maybe instead the person rolls a 7 and it's really good, so that maybe the 2 value says, hey, this jukebox maybe about $500. But the 7 tells you, hey, this jukebox $800. All right, that gives you an idea. Like, oh, we can make you can sell this for about $800 retail, which is great. So what you're trying to do is then try to figure out how to haggle below that. So like haggle roll next is where like it's really determinant on the GM. So the GM has a number that they really want to get, and they're going to try to get you to agree to that. And based on how well you do also determines, like, maybe this will also create a negotiation number, and the GM just gets to play the character and just be like, oh yeah, you rolled a 6 closer to a 7, your threshold's a 7, so maybe the haggle rolls like, oh wow, we're going to they're going to come down and meet your number and be great. Oh cool. And maybe that's something that does some more heavy lifting, that like, is the number valid? Its value is $800, and maybe offering $100 is an insult. So it could also affect the mood and the behavior of the characters as well. So I mean, there's a lot of possibilities, but this would be one of the games where, like, if you wanted to do it, you got to do it big and bold, like in an app. And I would imagine that, like, you could do this game and be like a Storage Wars, or you could do this game and be like a pawn shop, or pawn whatever, or you could do this game and be American Pickers, or Antiques Roadshow. But that's what makes this game interesting, is that you have to do something big and bold, and that's how I would do it. I don't have the money to create an app like that, or have the patience or the capability to make a app like that. But if you are listening and you want to run with this idea, and you want to create an American Pickers game, and you want to just take my thing and just run with it, you go right ahead. For the 3 or 2 or 1 or 9 or 7 or 0 people that are listening to this podcast right now, you are free to take any idea that I have on these podcasts and make whatever you want out of it. These are free to you for all those who listen, because if I'm concepting it, it's not necessarily a game that I'm like intrigued about. So these concept series games that I talk about, like how would I build this the Love is Blind game, or this one, or how would I make like the Hawaiian like surfer game, or how would I do like the sculpture being sculpted game. Like, you're free to just, if you want to take it and run with it, it's yours. If you want some like no concepts or thoughts, or if you wanted me to read your games, feel free. We are open to doing reviews. For anyone out there who's a designer, if you want to come in and do an interview with us, we're happy to have you. We are not opposed to having people come onto our show and talk to us, or if you want me to just do a review of one of your games and talk about the design elements of your games, we're happy to have you. We're very excited about these things. So if that's something you like, hit us up at Unnamed Game Co. The Unnamed Game Co. at gmail.com. We always are open to submissions or ideas. Stay on the lookout for Carradwin's world building podcast, and stay on the lookout for a potential AP that we're putting together in the future, because there is a lot coming through on our channel. And if you like what we do, if you like listening to my meanderings, please continue to listen and follow and subscribe. We really appreciate this. I know that I seem to just always operate off the cuff, but I feel like that's just something I do really well, and I think I do that better than I do other things. And love your feedback, so come talk to us. And thanks a lot, everybody.